The UN General Assembly is sometimes nicknamed speed dating for diplomats because it offers a chance for informal run-ins and meetings, even between representatives and politicians who don't usually get much FaceTime with each other. Day 3 saw two formerly estranged leaders break the ice after more than a decade of frosty relations. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan held their first ever meeting today at the fringes of the UN General Assembly. They discussed Israel's efforts to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia and closer cooperation in fields including energy, technology, and cybersecurity. Turkey's been on a charm offensive in recent years, trying to expand its influence in the Middle East. That has seen Ankara reaching out to historical rivals such as Egypt, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. Turkey's relations with Israel broke down in 2010 after Israeli commandos launched a deadly assault on the Turkish ship Mavi Marmara, which was attempting to deliver aid to the Gaza Strip. 10 Turkish activists died in the attack. Bilateral ties remained on ice for over a decade as a result, but the two countries have sought rapprochement in recent times. Stephen Cook is a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and an expert on the Middle East. He joins us tonight from Washington, D.C. Good to see you. Now, yesterday, Erdogan said he'd step up diplomacy to end the war in Ukraine. Today, he's endorsing normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia to lower tensions in the Middle East. There doesn't seem to be a conflict these days. Turkey doesn't want to be seen as solving. What's Erdogan's game plan here?
Well, there seems to be a return in some ways to the earliest years of Erdogan's tenure as Turkey's prime minister, in which Turkey was a very active player in Middle Eastern diplomacy and trying to be a problem solver and troubleshooter for the region. Erdogan is definitely looking to repair those relations that he damaged in subsequent years, and this is the result of it. Whether leaders like Benjamin Netanyahu or the Saudi leadership actually trust Erdogan is a different story. A lot has happened since those earliest days of Erdogan's rule in Turkey.
Could Turkey be instrumental in reaching a deal with Saudi Arabia?
I don't think so. The player here that is most important is the United States, because it's the United States that has much to offer the Saudis in return for normalizing with Israel. What the Turks are looking to get out of any normalization is generally a greater integration into the region so that they can benefit economically. Despite Turkey's economic problems at the moment, it really is perhaps, next to Israel, the most advanced industrial economy in the region and would stand to gain from more regional integration.
Okay, so they're not looking for peace, Turkey, they're looking for money, basically.
That's precisely what the story is. The Turks have made a very significant turnaround here, however, in their efforts to normalize their relations with the Israelis in particular. President Erdogan and Prime Minister Netanyahu have long avoided each other, and the normalization between these two countries has really been shepherded by Israel's President Isaac Herzog rather than Prime Minister Netanyahu. The Turks believe that this will help them in Washington, D.C. in turn.
Mm-hmm. Is this closening of ties, or this thawing that we're seeing, is this likely to have an effect on Turkey's policies towards the Palestinians? Because he's previously used the UN stage to really condemn in the harshest terms Israel's treatment of the Palestinians. Is that likely to change now?
It seems unlikely that Erdogan is going to give up the Palestinians. He's proven himself to be a pragmatist on a variety of issues, but the Palestinian issue is something that he feels very, very strongly about. It's possible that he'll tone down his rhetoric, but one Israeli attack in the Gaza Strip will change the tenor of Erdogan's public statements. For now, however, he is interested in normalizing relations with the Israelis, while at the same time pressing the Israelis on the Palestinian issue. Of course, he has to tread carefully because it is Erdogan who has really sought the normalization of relations. And in the 10 years between 2010, as you mentioned in your lead-in, between the Mavi Marmara incident and the thawing of relations between the two, the Israelis have moved on and developed relations with important countries in the Gulf, including Saudi Arabia, the UAE, tightens its ties with Greece and Cyprus, as well as continued to further develop its relations with Egypt, demonstrating that Turkey was not as critically, strategically important to Israel as some might have believed.
Now, this seems like another tightrope act by Turkey, doesn't it? There's always the dance between NATO and Russia. Now we're seeing, the thawing with Israel and sticking by the Palestinians. Can this go well?
Well, it can go well if Erdogan follows the script that he followed after he came to power in 2003, in which he developed his relations, Turkey's relations with Israel, while at the same time trying to be a constructive actor in fostering peace in the region. If, however, he turns once again to kind of very, very strong rhetoric about Israeli conduct in the West Bank or the Gaza Strip, it's likely not to go anywhere. I think the constraining factor on Erdogan is his belief that a warming of relations between Israel and Turkey will lead to better relations between Washington and Ankara. I'm not sure that that's actually accurate. There is a long list of differences between the Turkish and American governments that have absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with Israel. But keep in mind that President Erdogan comes from an Islamist background, and Islamists tend to see the world in a certain way, and they tend to see that Jews are powerful in Washington. And as a result, by warming relations with Israel, he'll somehow get a break in Washington. I think he's miscalculating there, and he misapprehends the power of Jewish groups and pro-Israel lobbies in Washington.
Yeah, and the relationship between Israel and Washington is also not the best at this moment in time. Stephen Cook from the Council on Foreign Relations. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.